What if the first person you accused of harming your child was the very soul destined to heal both of you? If this story touches your heart, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the rest of this journey. The late afternoon light filtered through the manicured hedges of the Hayes estate garden. Roses glowed in crimson rose, and the fountain at the center whispered its gentle song as if mocking the silence of the great stone mansion behind it. Alexander Hayes had returned home earlier than expected, his leather shoes crunching softly against the gravel path. After weeks of endless negotiations and transatlantic flights, he longed for nothing more than to hear his daughter's laughter. But instead of laughter, he found tension. Emily, just 6 years old, her tiny frame wrapped in a pale blue dress, stood with her crutches by the garden steps. Her legs were fragile, one weaker than the other since birth, yet her spirit was fierce. Near her side was Sophia, the new maid his housekeeper had vouched for. Alexander had not paid her much attention. One more pair of hands in a house run by schedules and silence. This was the first time he saw them together, and it would be the moment that etched suspicion into his heart. From across the hedge, a group of children from the neighboring estate leaned on the iron fence. Their voices, sharp with the cruelty of privilege, carried over. "Hey, princess with crutches," one boy jeered. "Bet you can't even make it to the fountain without falling," another chimed in. Emily's cheeks flushed red. She gripped her crutches tighter, her little chest heaving. Sophia bent slightly, whispering something Alexander couldn't hear, her hand gentle on the child's shoulder, but Emily's pride flared. "I'll show you!" she cried, thrusting one crutch forward and then another. Her movements quickened, reckless. Sophia's hands hovered, torn between helping and letting Emily prove herself. The fountain glistened just a few feet away, but Emily's stride stumbled on the uneven stone path. Her foot caught, her body tilted forward. Alexander stepped into view just as Emily fell. The sound of her small body hitting the ground tore through the air. She cried out, sharp and trembling, clutching her knee. Sophia lunged forward, her hand stretched out as though she had tried to stop it. But to Alexander's eyes it was too late. What he saw was Emily on the ground, tears staining her cheeks, and Sophia standing over her, her hands suspended in the guilty posture of someone who had pushed too far. "Emily!" His voice cracked like thunder. He rushed forward, scooping his daughter into his arms. Her little body shook against his chest, her sobs muffled by his suit. Sophia's lips trembled. "Mr. Hayes, I swear, I didn't—" "Enough." His tone sliced through the garden air. His gray eyes, cold as steel, bore into her. "I leave my daughter for weeks, and the moment I return, this is what I see?" Sophia's face drained of color. Her hands fell to her sides. Emily clung to her father's neck, sobbing. Yet in between hiccuped breaths, she shook her head. "Daddy, she didn't push me. I wanted to run. They called me names." But Alexander, his heart pounding with fear and fury, could not hear. The image of his fragile daughter sprawled across the stones overpowered her words. His arms tightened protectively, his mind already building walls around her. "From this day," he said, voice low and rigid, "you will remember your place." His glare flickered back at Sophia. "I will not have my daughter endangered by your carelessness." Sophia's eyes glistened, but she bowed her head. The accusation hung in the air like a verdict. The roses swayed gently, their crimson petals mocking her silence. Emily whimpered again, whispering desperately into her father's collar. "Daddy, please. She's my friend. Don't be mad at Sophia." But Alexander could not soften. Not yet. The garden that should have been a sanctuary became a courtroom that day, its marble paths etched with misunderstanding. And as Alexander carried Emily back toward the looming mansion, Sophia stood alone by the fountain, her heart heavy with the sting of injustice. She had entered this house to help a little girl walk stronger. Instead, she had been branded as the one who made her fall. The story of suspicion had just begun. The Hayes mansion had always been vast, but after the fall in the garden, its corridors seemed to stretch even wider, echoing with an unspoken tension. Crystal chandeliers glittered above silent meals, marble floors carried footsteps that refused to meet, and every closed door became a boundary between hearts. Alexander had decided, against the quick judgment that had burned on his tongue that afternoon, not to send Sophia away. Not because his pride relented, but because Emily had clung to him with tear-streaked cheeks, refusing to release his collar until he promised, "She stays." And so Sophia remained. Yet the atmosphere of the mansion shifted. To Alexander, she was now an unwelcome presence, a shadow moving quietly through the halls, careful not to disturb his gaze. His trust, once fragile, had cracked under suspicion. At dinner, Emily would chatter about her dolls, about her lessons, about how Sophia braided her hair in the mornings. Alexander listened with one ear, nodding at intervals, but his eyes would slide across the table to where Sophia served dishes with bowed head and silent hands. "Daddy," Emily said one evening, her fork pushing peas around her plate, "Sophia makes the best stories. She told me about stars that can't be seen, but are always there." Alexander's brow tightened. "Emily, eat your dinner." His voice was steady, but his eyes flickered toward Sophia, who froze mid-step with the serving tray. "Yes, Daddy," Emily whispered, though her little smile wilted. Sophia quietly resumed her place, but in her chest, something tightened. She was a ghost in a house that wanted her invisible, except to one child who refused to let her fade. Days unfolded with an odd rhythm. Alexander buried himself in his study, the heavy oak door closed for hours at a time. His empire demanded constant vigilance, and he told himself that his distance was necessary, that his absence was the cost of security and wealth. But in the stillness beyond that door, Sophia and Emily built a world of their own. In the mornings, Sophia guided Emily through stretches in the sunlit corner of the conservatory. "Hold my hands," Sophia would whisper, her voice gentle. "One step at a time. Breathe steady." Emily's determination lit her small face, her crutches clattering against the tile as she fought for balance. In the afternoons, they sat by the window with books. Sophia read aloud in a low, warm voice that painted the air with dragons and oceans and faraway stars. Emily leaned against her, eyes bright with wonder, whispering questions that revealed a mind hungry for more than pity. By evening, Sophia tucked her into bed with lullabies her grandmother once sang in Spanish. Emily would cling to her hand, refusing to let go until her breathing slowed into sleep. And always Alexander watched from a distance he did not name. Sometimes he would pass by the conservatory and catch sight of Sophia kneeling beside Emily, cheering softly when the girl managed 2 steps without faltering. The sound of Emily's laughter would swell against the coldness in his chest, tugging at something he had long buried. But his mind, ever guarded, would whisper back, "Remember the fall. Remember the danger." The mansion became a paradox. Warm in corners where Emily and Sophia bloomed, cold in halls where Alexander's silence ruled. One rainy evening, as the city lights flickered beyond the windows, Emily climbed onto her father's lap in the study. He closed his laptop reluctantly, brushing a hand through her soft curls. "Daddy?" she asked, tilting her head. "Do you like Sophia?" Alexander hesitated. The question was too direct, too piercing. "She takes care of you." Emily's lips curved in a knowing smile, the kind that children hold when they sense truths adults refuse to admit. "She's not just a maid. She's my best friend." The words struck Alexander with a quiet force. Best friend. It was a title that should belong to a peer, not an employee. Yet as he looked into his daughter's eyes, he saw the depth of her conviction. For Emily, friendship was measured in presence, in kindness, not in wealth or status. "Emily," he said softly, "your friends at school—" "They don't know me," she interrupted, shaking her head. "They laugh at me, Daddy. Sophia doesn't laugh. She listens." The innocence of her truth left Alexander silent. He hugged her close, his chest aching with an unfamiliar question. Have I ever listened like that? Meanwhile, Sophia carried her own storm quietly. Nights found her awake in the small servant's room, staring at the ceiling, remembering the garden. The look in Alexander's eyes haunted her. How quickly suspicion had replaced trust. She replayed the moment over and over, wishing she had moved faster, wishing she had shielded Emily before the fall. But each dawn, she rose and returned to her role. Not because of duty, not even for the paycheck she desperately needed, but because of Emily. The little girl's hand in hers, the stubborn determination in her eyes, it was a bond Sophia could not abandon. She endured Alexander's coldness because Emily's warmth was worth it. One night, as thunder rolled above Manhattan, Emily woke from a bad dream. Her cries echoed through the vast halls until Sophia rushed in, kneeling beside the bed. "Shh, it's okay, I'm here." She brushed back Emily's damp hair, humming softly. The bedroom door opened. Alexander stood there, his silhouette framed by lightning from the window. He saw his daughter clinging to Sophia, her sobs softening under the young woman's care. Something twisted inside him. He wanted to step forward, to be the one who banished the nightmares, but Emily's grip was not on him. It was on Sophia. "Daddy," Emily whispered between sleepy breaths. "Don't be mad at her. She's my safe place." Alexander's throat tightened. He stood in the doorway longer than he should have, then quietly stepped back into the hall. The door closed, leaving him in the echo of his own silence. The mansion was no longer merely a house of stone and chandeliers. It had become a mirror, reflecting Alexander's distance, Sophia's resilience, and Emily's desperate need for connection. And though Alexander told himself he was still in control, a fissure had begun to open in the fortress of his heart. The rain had passed, leaving the city washed and glistening. From the Hayes estate's wide windows, Manhattan stretched like a glittering tapestry, an empire Alexander commanded by day and retreated from by night. Inside, the silence persisted, though it had begun to shift in small, unnoticeable ways. Sophia moved quietly, almost like a shadow, but there were moments when her presence could not be ignored. She had begun to leave little traces of herself in Emily's world. A folded paper crane on the nightstand, a lullaby hummed in Spanish, a story about constellations that Emily repeated at breakfast with pride. For Alexander, those details were a puzzle. He did not want to admit curiosity, but when he saw Emily's eyes light up in ways he hadn't seen before, he found himself listening more carefully to the maid he still mistrusted. It was during one of Emily's therapy sessions in the conservatory that the truth began to surface. "Breathe, sweet girl," Sophia whispered, steadying Emily's crutch. "We're not racing anyone. Just one step stronger than yesterday." Emily grinned, sweat beading on her forehead as she placed one foot in front of the other. "I can do it. You'll see." Alexander stood at the doorway, his arms crossed, watching. He told himself he was only there to ensure safety, yet he lingered long after he should have returned to his work. His eyes narrowed on Sophia's movements, how she adjusted Emily's posture, how she corrected gently, never harshly. When Emily stumbled, Sophia knelt immediately. "I've got you," she said softly. And Emily, instead of crying, laughed through her wobble. That laughter stirred something deep inside Alexander. He remembered how Emily used to cry after every failed step when the professional therapists left her in frustration. But here, with this woman he distrusted, Emily laughed. Later that evening, as the girl napped in her room, Alexander found Sophia tidying the conservatory. He stepped inside, his presence filling the air with an unspoken weight. "You have experience," he said finally, his voice measured. "That much is obvious. Where did you learn these techniques? They're not in any manual for house staff." Sophia's hands paused on the folded blanket. She looked up slowly, her eyes carrying a shadow of memories that seemed far older than her years. "I learned them from Carlos," she whispered. "Carlos? My younger brother." Her voice trembled at first, but then steadied as though speaking his name gave her courage. "He was born with spina bifida. Doctors told us he might never walk. But my mother refused to let him believe that. She worked 2 jobs, and I became his helper, his little therapist, though I was only a girl myself." She placed the blanket down, her gaze distant. "We didn't have money for professionals, so I read everything I could find at the public library, books on physical therapy, anatomy, anything. At night, I would practice with him. Stretching, balance, exercises. Some days he screamed from pain, some days he just cried. But then, he began to take steps." The conservatory grew very still. Alexander's posture stiffened, but his voice softened despite himself. "And now?" Sophia's eyes clouded. "He didn't make it. A fever, it was fast. We didn't even reach the hospital in time." She blinked quickly, as though refusing to let the tears fall. "But before he died, he walked across our living room floor. I'll never forget it. He turned to me and said, 'You kept your promise, Hermana.'" Her Spanish accent lingered faintly on the word. "Sister." For the first time, Alexander found no reply. The cold certainty of his suspicions wavered under the weight of her truth. The next days unfolded differently. Though he still wore his armor of silence, Alexander began to watch Sophia with a new lens. He noticed how she carried Emily when the girl was too tired to use her crutches, how she hummed quietly while braiding hair, how she smiled through her own exhaustion. One afternoon, he returned early from the office. The mansion was quieter than usual. Following faint music, he discovered Sophia at the piano in the drawing room, Emily seated beside her. Sophia's fingers moved gently across the keys, playing a lullaby Alexander had not heard since his late wife sang it. Emily swayed softly, her small hands tapping the rhythm on her lap. When Sophia finished, Emily clapped. "Again! Again!" Sophia laughed, and in that laugh, Alexander heard something both fragile and strong. The resilience of someone who had known sorrow, yet still chose to bring light. That night, Emily asked at dinner, "Daddy, did you know Sophia had a brother who was sick like me?" Alexander's fork froze halfway to his mouth. He glanced at Sophia, who sat silently, her eyes lowered. Emily continued without hesitation. "She helped him walk. Just like she helps me." The words struck deeper than Alexander expected. He felt a strange pang, envy perhaps, that his daughter's triumphs were tied to someone else. But woven in that pang was something heavier, the undeniable truth that Sophia was not careless. She was capable. And yet, the memory of the fall in the garden still burned. Later, when the mansion hushed into night, Alexander stood by Emily's door, listening to Sophia's soft voice as she read aloud. "Once upon a time, there was a little bird who had one broken wing. The other birds laughed at him because he could not fly. But the bird never gave up. He hopped, and one day he discovered he could sing louder than any of them. His song filled the sky, and no one laughed again." Emily's giggle followed, then silence as sleep pulled her under. Alexander lingered in the hallway, the story echoing inside him. a bird with a broken wing, a girl with fragile legs, a maid with hidden scars. For the first time since the fall, doubt crept into his certainty. Perhaps Sophia had not been the villain in that garden. Perhaps she was the one carrying a truth he had been blind to see. The first chill of autumn settled over Manhattan, carrying with it the scent of leaves beginning to turn. At the Hayes mansion, the ivy along the stone walls had begun its slow shift from green to amber, mirroring the subtle changes taking place within the family that lived there. Emily was growing stronger. With Sophia at her side, her steps were less tentative, her laughter more frequent. The house, once so quiet it echoed like a cathedral, was now filled with small, living sounds, the thud of crutches on marble, the ripple of childish giggles, the soft hum of Spanish lullabies. But for Alexander, these sounds were not always comforting. They reminded him of how much of Emily's world he did not occupy. One Saturday morning, Emily was perched on the couch, her crutches resting beside her. Sophia sat on the rug, showing her how to fold paper into small boats. The girl's bright voice carried through the living room. "Look, Daddy," Emily called when she spotted him standing near the doorway. "Sophia taught me how to make them float in a bowl of water. She says if we put them in the fountain, they'll look like little ships going on adventures." Alexander stepped forward, his polished shoes soundless on the carpet. He forced a smile. "That's very clever, sweetheart." Sophia looked up at him, her expression cautious. Ever since the night she shared about Carlos, a fragile truce had hung between them, neither trust nor rejection, but something unspoken. Emily, unaware of the quiet tension, reached for her father's hand. "Daddy, will you play too?" Alexander's throat tightened. It had been years since he had sat on the floor, folding paper with anyone. His world was a meetings, contracts, markets that shifted like tides. Paper, to him, was for signing, never for boats. "Another time," he said gently, patting her small hand. "I have a call soon." Emily's smile dimmed. She lowered her gaze to the boat in her lap. Sophia caught the flicker of disappointment in the girl's face. She said nothing, only folded another boat with quiet patience. That evening, as Emily lay in bed, her voice broke the stillness. "Daddy?" Alexander, seated beside her, brushed hair from her forehead. "Yes, darling?" "Do you know the difference between a dad and a friend?" The question startled him. "Of course," he said carefully. "A dad is, well, he's your father. He protects you, provides for you." Emily's small brow furrowed. "But a friend is there when you're sad. A friend plays with you. A friend listens." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Sophia listens." The words landed like stones in Alexander's chest. He felt the sting of truth, though it came from the innocence of a child. He kissed her forehead and turned off the lamp. But long after she drifted to sleep, he sat in the darkened room, the echo of her words gnawing at him. Was I only a father in name, not in presence? The following week, the answer came in sharper relief. Emily had been invited to a classmate's birthday party at Central Park. The wide lawns were filled with balloons, games, and shrieking children. Alexander stood apart, his tailored suit drawing stares from the other parents, while Sophia knelt by Emily, encouraging her to join the races. "Come on," Sophia urged, her hand light on the girl's shoulder. "Just try one round. Don't worry about winning. Just feel the grass under your feet." Emily's eyes darted nervously to the other children, who whispered and giggled at the sight of her crutches. She shrank back, clutching Sophia's hand. Alexander stepped forward. "Emily, you don't have to." But Emily shook her head. "No, Daddy. I want to. With Sophia. And so, holding Sophia's hand, Emily walked to the starting line. The other children darted ahead as soon as the whistle blew, but Emily took careful, deliberate steps. Each one was cheered by Sophia's voice, not the crowd's. She came in last, but when she crossed the line, Sophia lifted her into a hug. "You did it!" she exclaimed, her laughter mingling with Emily's. Alexander clapped politely, but his chest ached. The image was unmistakable. His daughter looking at Sophia with the adoration that should have been his. That night, Alexander poured himself a glass of scotch in the study. The amber liquid caught the city lights outside, reflecting his conflicted expression. He was a man who had conquered boardrooms, who could sway markets with a single decision. Yet here, in the realm of fatherhood, he was faltering. Sophia, the woman he had distrusted, was filling a space he should have occupied. And yet, wasn't that what Emily needed? Someone who listened? Someone present? The contradiction tormented him. He wanted to dismiss Sophia, to reclaim his place as the center of Emily's world. But another part of him, the quieter, more human part, recognized that Emily's smile was brighter because of her. For a man who had built his life on control, the realization felt like surrender. A few days later, Emily voiced the thought he feared most. She was sitting at the piano with Sophia when Alexander entered. Her small fingers pressed a hesitant tune, guided by Sophia's steady hand. When she noticed her father, she grinned. "Daddy, listen," she cried. "Sophia says I play with my heart." "That's wonderful," Alexander said, his tone warm, though his chest tightened. Emily leaned against Sophia's shoulder, her voice soft but clear. "Daddy, you're my dad, but Sophia is my best friend. And sometimes, I need a friend more than I need a dad." The room fell silent. Alexander stood frozen, his jaw tense, his hands curled into fists at his sides. The words, spoken with such innocent honesty, cut deeper than any boardroom betrayal. He wanted to protest, to remind her of everything he had sacrificed, the empire he had built to give her security. But he could not, because deep down, he knew she was right. He had been a provider. Sophia had been present. That night, Alexander lay awake long after the mansion had gone dark. He stared at the ceiling, Emily's words echoing in his mind. A dad or a friend? Which one have I truly been? For the first time in years, the powerful CEO felt small, like a man lost in his own house, surrounded by silence he had built with his own choices. And in the quiet, another truth whispered. Perhaps the one he had mistrusted was not an intruder, but the bridge back to his daughter's heart. The conservatory was bathed in the pale glow of late afternoon. Tall windows caught the gold of the lowering sun, pouring light over polished floors where Emily stood, trembling but determined. Her crutches leaned against the wall. For the first time, she was attempting to stand without them. Sophia knelt a few feet away, her hands hovering in the air, not touching, but ready. "You don't need to rush," she whispered. "Just feel the ground. Trust yourself." Emily's small hands clenched at her sides, her legs quivering as she tried to balance. "I can do it," she breathed, her eyes wide with effort. Alexander stood in the doorway, unseen. He had come back early, restless from a day of meetings that blurred into noise. He had told himself he only stopped by to check on progress. Yet as he leaned against the heavy wooden frame, his eyes locked on his daughter, and the world outside seemed to fall away. Emily swayed, her body pitching slightly forward. Sophia's muscles tensed, but she didn't move. Instead, her voice steadied the air. "You're stronger than yesterday. Don't think about falling. Think about standing." The silence was thick. Then, slowly, Miraculously, Emily straightened her little shoulders. For 30 seconds, she stood without support. Her lips parted in awe. "I'm doing it," she gasped. Sophia's eyes shone. "Yes, you are." From the doorway, Alexander felt something shift inside him. He had seen countless achievements in his life. Mergers sealed, skyscrapers erected, fortunes multiplied. None of them compared to this fragile miracle, his daughter, balancing on her own, with nothing but willpower and faith, and guiding her, the woman he had distrusted most. Emily collapsed into Sophia's arms at last, laughing breathlessly. "Did you see? I was flying!" Sophia hugged her tightly, her laughter soft with pride. "You were soaring higher than the stars." Alexander stepped forward, his voice deeper than he intended. "Emily." The girl turned, cheeks glowing, hair damp with sweat. "Daddy, did you see me?" He swallowed. "I saw." His gaze flicked briefly to Sophia, whose expression was guarded, as though waiting for judgment. For a moment, he considered holding his silence. Pride wrestled with suspicion. The memory of the fall in the garden still haunted him. But Emily's joy was too pure to deny. "You were extraordinary," he said finally, his voice gentler. Emily beamed. She tugged at Sophia's hand. "It's because of her. Sophia makes me brave." The words landed heavily. Alexander's eyes lingered on Sophia's face. She did not gloat, did not even smile, only lowered her head, humility written in every line. Later that evening, Alexander found himself pacing his study. The crackle of the fireplace could not quiet the turmoil in his mind. He poured a glass of whiskey, but barely touched it. The image replayed again and again. Emily, standing tall. Sophia, guiding her with patience. It was undeniable. Whatever had happened in the garden weeks before, this young woman was not careless. She was deliberate, steady. She had given Emily what doctors and therapists, despite all their training and fees, could not: hope. And yet, his pride clung to the suspicion like a thorn. Hadn't he seen Sophia near Emily as she fell? Hadn't he felt that jolt of fear when his little girl cried out in pain? Trust did not come easily to a man who built his life on contracts and clauses. Trust had to be measured, signed, sealed. But tonight, something small had cracked open. The next morning, Emily burst into his office, dragging Sophia by the hand. Her eyes sparkled. "Daddy, you have to see again. I can do it longer this time." Alexander rose from behind his desk, caught between exasperation and awe. He followed them to the conservatory, where Emily once more set aside her crutches. This time, she stood for nearly a full minute. When she finally stumbled, she fell not in defeat, but into Sophia's waiting arms, laughing. "See, Daddy?" she panted. "I'm stronger." Alexander knelt, pulling her into his embrace. He kissed her temple, his throat tight. "Yes, you are." Sophia stepped back, silent, giving them space. For the first time, Alexander looked at her without the cloud of accusation. The memory of her hand outstretched during the fall, the moment he had judged so harshly, shifted in his mind. Could it have been not a push, but an attempt to save? He did not speak it aloud, but something unspoken passed between them, a flicker of acknowledgement, fragile as glass. That night, when Emily was asleep, Alexander stood in the hallway outside her room. Sophia emerged quietly, carrying an empty glass of water. She froze at the sight of him. "Mr. Hayes," she said softly, almost bowing. He cleared his throat, his voice low. "Earlier, in the conservatory." "Thank you." Sophia's eyes widened as though she hadn't expected gratitude. She nodded, her words humble. She does the hard part. I only remind her she can. For once, Alexander had no retort. He simply held her gaze a moment longer before turning away. It was not forgiveness. It was not yet trust. But it was the first step. The following days saw a change in the mansion's rhythm. Meals were still quiet, but the silence was less sharp. Alexander found himself pausing longer at the conservatory door, drawn by the sound of Emily's laughter. Sometimes, when she begged him to watch, he sat on the couch while Sophia guided her exercises. He never interfered, but his presence no longer felt like judgment. Emily, perceptive as ever, noticed. One afternoon, as she leaned against Sophia's shoulder after another practice session, she looked at her father and whispered, "See, Daddy? We're all a team." The words lingered in Alexander's heart long after. A team. Not suspicion. Not distance. A team. In the quiet of his study that night, Alexander stared out at the Manhattan skyline. The city glittered with 1,000 ambitions, each skyscraper a monument to wealth and power. But what echoed in his mind was not numbers or contracts. It was his daughter's trembling voice. "We're all a team." Perhaps for the first time, he began to believe it could be true. The city glowed in twilight, Manhattan's skyline painted in shades of violet and gold. Inside the Hayes mansion, the evening was quieter than usual. Emily had finally fallen asleep after a long day of exercises, her breathing soft and steady. Alexander lingered in the study, pacing between the shelves lined with leather-bound books. A single lamp cast amber light across his desk, illuminating documents he hadn't touched. His mind was not on mergers or market reports tonight. It was fixed on a single thought: the image of Emily standing tall, Sophia's voice steadying her steps. For weeks he had fought against it. Pride had told him to keep distance, to cling to suspicion. But the truth was undeniable now. Sophia was changing Emily's world. More than doctors, more than tutors, more than he, her father, had managed on his own. It was time to decide whether to trust her, not halfway, not reluctantly, but openly. The following morning, Sophia found herself summoned to the study. She entered cautiously, her hands clasped before her. The room smelled faintly of cedar and cigar smoke, its walls lined with the legacy of generations of wealth. Alexander stood near the window, his back to her, gazing out at the city. "You asked for me, Mr. Hayes?" she said softly. He turned, his gray eyes steady. This time they did not carry the cold edge of accusation. They carried something heavier: deliberation. "Yes," he said simply. "Sit." She obeyed, perching on the edge of the leather chair across from his desk. Her heart pounded. Had she made a mistake? Would he dismiss her after all? But Alexander's voice was calm. "I've watched you with my daughter. I cannot deny what I've seen. Emily is stronger, braver, happier." His jaw tightened. "And I know it is because of you." Sophia's lips parted in surprise. She lowered her gaze. "She does the work, Mr. Hayes. I only believe in her." "That belief," he said firmly, "is what she's needed most." For a long moment the study was silent, except for the ticking of the antique clock on the mantel. Then Alexander leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk. "I want to make you an offer," he said. "Not as a maid, as something more formal. I want you to be Emily's therapeutic companion. You'll focus solely on her physical progress, her confidence, her well-being. I will handle the rest." Sophia blinked, stunned. Therapeutic? Companion? Yes. It's not a title you'll find in any manual, but it's what you already are. His eyes searched hers. You have a gift, Sophia, and I would be a fool not to recognize it. Her breath caught. The weight of his words pressed against her chest. For the first time since she entered this house, she felt the acknowledgement she had longed for, not as a servant, but as someone who mattered. But beneath the astonishment, fear stirred. Why me? She whispered. You could hire licensed therapists, specialists. I already have, Alexander cut in. They gave up after weeks. You've accomplished more in a month than they did in a year. And you did it not with credentials, but with heart. He paused, his voice softening. I can't ignore that anymore. Sophia's hands trembled in her lap. This was everything she wanted: recognition, purpose, the chance to continue helping Emily. Yet the memory of the garden lingered, the look in Alexander's eyes when he had accused her. Mr. Hayes, she said carefully, her voice tight with vulnerability. What if you still don't trust me? What if one mistake, one stumble, and it all disappears? Alexander's expression shifted. For the first time, he looked almost wounded. He leaned back, his gaze falling briefly to the floor before returning to her. You're right, he admitted quietly. I haven't trusted easily. Not since. He trailed off, the shadow of grief flickering across his features. But that's my failure, not yours. Sophia held her breath. I can't erase the mistake of that day in the garden, he continued, but I can tell you this. What I saw yesterday, watching Emily stand on her own, it's something I'll carry for the rest of my life. And I know it's because of you. That deserves trust. His words hung in the air, fragile yet sincere. Then came the final blow that shook Sophia's heart. I'll also sponsor your education, Alexander said. If you choose to pursue a degree in physical therapy, I'll cover your tuition. You've already proven your skill. I'd like to see it recognized. Sophia's eyes widened. My tuition? Yes. His tone was steady, practical, yet beneath it lay something deeper. Consider it an investment, not just in Emily, but in you. She pressed a hand to her mouth, overwhelmed. For years, she had buried the dream of returning to school. After Carlos's death, after her family's struggles, it had seemed impossible. Now, here was a man who had once accused her, offering to lift her dream from the ashes. Tears burned her eyes. I don't know what to say. Alexander's voice softened. Say yes. For Emily. For yourself. That night, Sophia sat awake in her small room, staring at the letterhead paper Alexander had left on her desk, formal terms for her new role, along with the offer of education. Her hands traced the embossed crest at the top. It felt unreal. Recognition, opportunity, a future. And yet doubt whispered in her heart. Did Alexander truly trust her? Or was this only a contract, another business arrangement dressed in generosity? Would his faith last beyond the first mistake? She closed her eyes, whispering into the quiet, Carlos, what would you tell me? She imagined her brother's voice, playful and firm. Take the step, Hermana. Don't let fear steal it. And so, through trembling hands and brimming eyes, she resolved to accept. In the days that followed, the mansion felt different. Sophia was no longer invisible. At meals, Alexander addressed her directly, asking about Emily's progress. When he passed by the conservatory, his eyes met hers without suspicion. Emily, of course, was delighted. See, Daddy? She said one evening, her crutches forgotten beside the couch. "I told you we're a team." Sophia smiled faintly, her heart swelling. For the first time, she was no longer just enduring this house. She was part of it. But in the quiet of her heart, one fear remained. Would Alexander's trust hold when the world outside, the whispers of wealth, the scrutiny of society, tested it? Sophia did not yet know. But she knew this. She had taken the first step toward a dream she thought long dead. And Emily's smile was proof that it was worth it. The chandeliers of the Metropolitan Museum of Art glittered like frozen constellations, their light cascading over gowns of silk and tuxedos pressed to perfection. It was the night of the annual Metropolitan Gala, an evening where Manhattan's elite paraded their wealth and whispered their judgments behind glasses of champagne. For Alexander Hayes, attendance was not optional. His empire demanded visibility, and the gala was where reputations were cemented or destroyed. Yet this year, as he stepped onto the marble floor of the Great Hall, his mind was not on the shareholders or the rivals scanning his every move. It was on Sophia, walking a few paces behind with Emily's hand tucked in hers. Sophia's dress was modest, a soft navy borrowed from the housekeeper's wardrobe, yet on her it looked elegant. Her presence in that gilded crowd was an anomaly, and already eyes had begun to narrow. They hadn't been inside for 5 minutes before the whispers began. "Isn't that the maid?" murmured a woman in diamonds so large they caught the chandelier light. "Hayes must have lost his touch, bringing the help to a gala." Poor child. Paraded around with a nanny instead of her mother. Sophia felt the sting of their voices like needles against her skin. She kept her chin lifted, her hand steady in Emily's. The little girl, sensing the hostility, clutched tighter. "Don't listen," Sophia whispered. "We're here together. That's all that matters." But the murmurs spread like wildfire, cloaked in laughter and raised brows. To them, Sophia was a trespasser in their gilded world, a shadow among chandeliers. Alexander stood near the center of the hall, engaged in half-hearted conversation with a fellow CEO. His ears caught fragments of the whispers, the sly glances aimed at Sophia. At first, he ignored them. Reputation was a battlefield he had learned to endure. But when he saw Emily's face crumple with confusion and Sophia's knuckles whitening around the child's hand, something inside him shifted. He excused himself from the conversation and strode toward them. The crowd's murmurs softened into silence as he approached. Emily looked up, her eyes shimmering. "Daddy, they're being mean to Sophia." Alexander knelt so his daughter could hear every word. "You know what I think?" His voice carried warmth. "I think anyone who can't see Sophia's worth is blind." The room stilled. He rose to his full height, his gaze sweeping the crowd, his voice clear and unshaken. "This is Sophia. She has done for my daughter what wealth, doctors, and endless specialists could not. She gave her strength. She gave her courage. She gave her laughter back. If you call that a servant, then perhaps you don't know the meaning of service at all." Gasps rippled through the hall. Some guests shifted uncomfortably. Others lowered their eyes. Sophia froze, her breath caught in her throat. For weeks, she had lived under the shadow of suspicion, carrying the weight of that garden fall. Now, here, before Manhattan's elite, Alexander Hayes, cold, impenetrable Alexander, was declaring her worth. Her heart trembled with something dangerously close to relief. Emily, too young to grasp the weight of the moment, only smiled wide. "See? I told you, Daddy. We're a team." The crowd moved on quickly, their hunger for gossip redirected to another scandal across the room. But for Sophia, the moment lingered like sunlight after rain. Later, as the night drew on, Sophia found herself standing by the balcony overlooking Central Park. The city glittered below, a restless ocean of light. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to calm the storm inside. "Cold?" The voice came from behind. Alexander stepped onto the balcony, the crisp night air ruffling his silvering hair. He offered her his jacket, and after a moment's hesitation, she accepted. "You didn't have to say those things," she said softly. "Yes, I did." His voice carried no hesitation. "They were true." Sophia looked away, her eyes glistening. "I never belonged here. They were right to whisper." Alexander shook his head. "You belong wherever Emily needs you, and tonight proved something I should have said long ago." "What's that?" "That I was wrong." His words came with the weight of admission. "Wrong to doubt you. Wrong to let suspicion cloud what I saw. You didn't push her that day. You've only ever lifted her." The confession stole Sophia's breath. For weeks, she had lived with the shadow of that misunderstanding. Now, at last, it lifted. Her voice trembled. "Do you mean that?" His gaze was steady. "I do." Inside the hall, the orchestra began a slow waltz. Through the glass doors, Sophia could see couples moving gracefully across the floor. For a fleeting moment, she imagined what it would be like to join them, not as a maid, but as herself. Alexander seemed to sense her thought. "Come inside," he said gently. "Not for them. For Emily. She should see us stand together." And so, side by side, they returned to the gala. Emily, perched on a chair near the dance floor, clapped her hands in delight as she saw them. "Dance, Daddy! Dance with Sophia!" Laughter rippled through Alexander's chest, surprising even him. He extended a hand. Sophia hesitated, then placed her trembling fingers in his. They moved slowly, carefully. Two people carrying scars, circling in the glow of chandeliers. Around them, whispers still lingered, but Alexander's words had already silenced what mattered most. For the first time since entering this mansion, Sophia no longer felt like an intruder. She felt seen. Later, when the limousine carried them home through the quiet streets, Emily's head rested on Sophia's lap, fast asleep. Alexander sat across, watching the scene with unreadable eyes. But inside, something irrevocable had shifted. The whispers of the gala had tried to diminish Sophia. Instead, they had forced him to choose. And he had chosen, this time without hesitation, her side. The weeks after the gala brought a quiet rhythm to the Hayes mansion. Trust, though still fragile, had begun to take root. Alexander no longer avoided Sophia's eyes. Instead, he acknowledged her presence with words measured but genuine. Emily, sensing the shift, thrived in the warmth of a household that no longer carried the same chill of suspicion. Each morning, Sophia guided Emily through her therapy in the conservatory, and each evening, Alexander found himself drawn to watch. Sometimes he offered encouragement, sometimes he simply stood in silence, his presence a silent admission that he was no longer the only anchor in his daughter's life. But just as peace began to feel possible, temptation came knocking. It arrived in the form of Marcus Caldwell. Marcus was an old acquaintance of Alexander's, a venture capitalist with the kind of charm that could fill a room. Where Alexander's reputation was built on discipline and calculation, Marcus thrived on bold gestures and relentless networking. One crisp afternoon, Marcus appeared unannounced at the Hayes estate, his tailored coat dusted with winter frost. Alexander, though wary, received him in the drawing room. Sophia, as duty required, entered with tea. Marcus's eyes lingered on her longer than courtesy allowed. A knowing smile curled on his lips. "And who might this be?" he asked, his tone smooth. Alexander's jaw tightened. Sophia. She's Emily's therapeutic companion. Marcus chuckled. Companion, is it? Fascinating. His gaze swept back to Sophia, appraising. You've done remarkable work. Word is, Emily's progress has astonished even her doctors. Sophia flushed under the attention. Emily works hard every day. I only guide her. Marcus leaned forward, his voice dropping into the cadence of persuasion. I have a proposition. My nephew, bright boy, but he suffers from cerebral palsy. Therapists have failed to connect with him. We need someone with your gift. I'll pay you triple whatever Hayes does, and I'll arrange housing, education, anything you require. The words hung heavy in the air. Sophia's breath caught. Triple. The number echoed in her mind, tangled with memories of overdue bills, her mother's weary face, and her own abandoned dreams of school. With that kind of money, she could send her younger cousins to college, perhaps even support her mother in comfort. Alexander's eyes sharpened. She's not for hire, Marcus. Marcus arched a brow. Everyone is for hire, Alex. You of all people should know. Sophia felt the tension coil between them like a drawn bow. She lowered her gaze, torn between gratitude for Alexander's defense and the weight of temptation pressing against her conscience. That evening, Emily found Sophia quiet, her usual stories missing their spark. Why are you sad? Emily asked, her small hand brushing Sophia's sleeve. Sophia forced a smile. I'm not sad, Carino. Just thinking. About leaving? Emily's voice cracked. Sophia froze. Why would you say that? Because I heard Mr. Caldwell. Tears welled in Emily's eyes. He said he'd take you away. You're not leaving, right? Please don't leave me, Sophia. You're my best friend. You're my safe place. The child's trembling words pierced Sophia's heart. She hugged Emily tight, whispering, I'm not going anywhere. Not if you need me. But deep inside, the storm raged. Later that night, Alexander found Sophia standing alone in the conservatory, staring at the fountain where the first fall had once condemned her. The moonlight painted her face in silver, her eyes clouded with conflict. He stepped closer, his voice low but firm. Marcus won't stop. He knows talent when he sees it. But this isn't about money. It's about loyalty. Where do you stand, Sophia? Her lips parted, but the words tangled. You don't understand. My family, we've struggled for years. What he offered could change everything for them. I can't pretend it doesn't matter. Alexander's eyes softened, but his tone held steel. I do understand. More than you think. But listen to me carefully. Emily doesn't see you as a therapist or a maid. She sees you as part of her family. And so do I. Sophia blinked, startled. You're not for sale, he continued. Not at triple, not at 10 times. You belong here, with us. The conviction in his voice struck her harder than Marcus's offer ever could. For weeks, she had longed to know if Alexander truly trusted her. Tonight, at last, the answer rang clear. The next day, Marcus returned, expecting negotiation. Instead, Sophia met him in the foyer with steady eyes. I can't accept, she said. His brows lifted. Triple the salary, Sophia. You'd be a fool to— I'm not for sale, she cut in, her voice firm. Emily needs me. And I need her. Marcus's smile faltered. He glanced at Alexander, standing tall at the stairwell, arms crossed. For once, Marcus found no leverage. With a dismissive shrug, he left, his footsteps echoing through the marble hall. When the doors closed, silence followed. Emily rushed into the room, wrapping her arms around Sophia's waist. "I knew you wouldn't leave." Sophia bent down, pressing her cheek to the child's hair. Her voice cracked, but it was steady. "No, sweet girl, I'll never leave." Alexander descended the stairs slowly. His gaze met Sophia's, not with suspicion, but with something deeper. Trust. Unshakable at last. "Thank you," he said simply. Sophia nodded, her eyes shimmering. In that moment, the ghost of the garden fall was finally replaced by something stronger. A bond forged not by accident, but by choice. That night, as the mansion settled into sleep, Sophia stood by Emily's bedside, watching her chest rise and fall in peaceful rhythm. Alexander lingered at the doorway. "She's safe," Sophia whispered, smoothing the blankets. "She is," Alexander agreed. His voice was softer than she had ever heard it. "Because of you." For the first time, Sophia believed it, truly believed it. And though temptation had come dressed in wealth and promises, she had discovered something greater than money. A place where she belonged. The morning sunlight poured gently through the tall windows of the conservatory, gilding the marble floor with streaks of gold. Emily stood at the center of the room, her small hands clenched at her sides, her crutches leaning against the wall. Her eyes glimmered with both fear and determination. Sophia knelt in front of her, her voice low and calm. "You're ready, Emily. Not because I say so, but because you believe it." Emily swallowed hard. "What if I fall?" Alexander stood just a few feet away, his heart pounding in his chest. For weeks he had been preparing for this moment, watching Emily grow stronger, steadier. Now, as he gazed at his daughter, he felt a storm inside, pride, fear, and hope all tangled together. "If you fall," Sophia whispered, smiling, "I'll be here. And so will your dad. You're not alone." Emily took a shaky breath. Then, with trembling legs, she took her first step. The silence in the conservatory was so deep that the sound of her foot touching the marble seemed like thunder. One step, then another. Her knees wavered, her body leaned dangerously, but she steadied herself. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm walking." Alexander's vision blurred with tears. He had prepared himself for this moment, but nothing could have readied him for the sight of his little girl, once trapped behind crutches, now moving freely toward him. "You're doing it, sweetheart," he said, his voice trembling. "You're walking." Sophia's eyes shone as she kept close but did not touch. She knew Emily needed this victory for herself. Every second felt like a lifetime. And then, miracle. Emily reached her father. With the final ounce of strength, she stepped into his waiting arms. Alexander fell to his knees, gathering her against his chest, his tears spilling into her hair. "You did it," he whispered again and again. "You did it, my brave girl." Emily laughed through her tears, clinging tightly to him. "I'm not broken anymore, Daddy. I'm strong." Sophia stood a few feet away, her hands pressed to her lips, her own tears flowing freely. For weeks she had carried the shadow of doubt, the memory of the fall, the coldness of Alexander's suspicion. Now, here, in this moment, all of it dissolved. She was no longer the girl who had been accused of harming Emily. She was the one who had helped her rise. Later, they moved into the garden, the same place where Emily's journey had begun in pain. The autumn air was crisp, the roses fading but still fragrant. Sophia suggested they try again outside, where Emily had once fallen. At first, Alexander resisted. The memory of that day still burned in his chest, but Emily insisted. "I want to show the garden I'm not afraid anymore." So they went. Emily stood on the very path where she had stumbled, her tiny chin lifted in defiance. She glanced at Sophia, then at her father. "Are you both ready?" Alexander's throat tightened. "Always." Sophia nodded, her eyes steady. "Go ahead, sweet girl." This time, Emily walked across the stones without hesitation. Her steps were uneven, her balance imperfect, but her courage was radiant. Each step was a declaration. I am not broken. I am not weak. I am free. When she reached the fountain, she turned and shouted with laughter, "See? Princess with crutches can walk!" The words, once cruel taunts from other children, now rang with triumph. Alexander crossed to her, scooping her into his arms, spinning her gently until her laughter filled the air. He kissed her cheeks, his tears mingling with her joy. Sophia stood nearby, her heart full, watching father and daughter embrace beneath the same roses that had once witnessed suspicion and sorrow. It was more than progress. It was a resurrection. That evening, the household celebrated quietly. The cook baked Emily's favorite chocolate cake, and the dining table, so often cold with silence, echoed with laughter. Emily demanded 3 helpings, proclaiming that walking deserved a feast. At one point, Emily looked between her father and Sophia and whispered, "I think God sent her to us." Alexander met Sophia's eyes across the table. For once, there was no distance, no hesitation, only truth. "Yes," he said softly. "I believe he did." Sophia looked down quickly, overwhelmed. For months, she had endured suspicion, whispers, temptation. Tonight, she finally felt seen for who she was, not a servant, not a trespasser, but family. Later that night, when Emily was asleep, Alexander found Sophia on the balcony overlooking the city. She turned when she heard his footsteps, her eyes shining in the moonlight. "Mr. Hayes," she began, but he lifted a hand. "Alexander," he corrected gently. "After what you've given my daughter, you've earned the right to call me by my name." Sophia's lips parted, stunned. She nodded slowly. "Alexander." He stepped closer, his voice low. "I owe you more than thanks. I owe you an apology. From the day of that fall, I doubted you. I saw only what fear allowed me to see. Tonight, I know the truth. You didn't harm Emily. You saved her, again and again." Her eyes filled with tears. "I didn't need an apology. I only needed you to see her, to believe in her." "I see her now," he whispered, "and I see you." For a long moment they stood in silence, the city's lights glittering like stars beneath them. The miracle had not just been Emily's steps. It was Alexander's first unguarded confession. It was Sophia's vindication. It was the birth of a trust that could not be undone. The garden had witnessed a fall. Tonight, it had witnessed redemption. The garden had seen many things. It had seen Emily's fall, her tears soaking into the stone path while suspicion darkened her father's heart. It had seen Sophia's silence, carrying the weight of an accusation she could not shake. It had seen distance, mistrust, and the invisible walls of grief. But on this day, the garden bloomed with a different kind of memory. The roses glistened in the morning sun, and the fountain whispered gently, as if it too longed to witness healing. At the center stood Emily, dressed in a simple ivory dress that fluttered in the breeze. She leaned not on crutches, but on joy. In her small hands, she clutched a basket of petals. Alexander Hayes stood nearby, his gray eyes uncharacteristically soft. For once, the weight of empire and fortune seemed absent. Instead, He wore the quiet reverence of a man who had found the one thing money could not buy: a second chance. And at his side stood Sophia. Her gown was pale, flowing like water, simple yet radiant. Her hair was pinned back loosely, strands brushing her cheeks. She looked not like a maid, not like a guest in a mansion where she didn't belong, but like herself, a woman who had endured loss and suspicion and still chosen love. Today was not about wealth. It was about family. The ceremony was small, almost intimate. A few close friends, a handful of witnesses, and Emily, who insisted on being the flower girl. When the officiant began to speak, Emily tugged on Sophia's hand. "Now I have both my superhero and my best friend forever," she whispered loudly enough for the guests to hear. Laughter rippled through the garden, soft and warm. Alexander's throat tightened. He glanced at Sophia, whose eyes brimmed with tears. For all their differences, for all the storms they had survived, Emily's words captured the truth. They were no longer fragments of broken lives. They were whole, together. The vows were simple. Alexander's voice trembled as he spoke. "I once thought wealth could protect us, that control could replace presence. But my daughter showed me otherwise. She showed me that trust is stronger than fear, and love is stronger than pride. Sophia, you gave Emily her steps back, and in doing so, you gave me mine. I vow to walk beside you every day in gratitude and in love." Sophia's reply came through tears. "I came into this house as a stranger, carrying the memory of a brother I could not save. I never expected to find a family here. But Emily became my light, and you, Alexander, became the proof that broken hearts can still heal. I vow to stand with you both, not as a servant, not as a guest, but as family." Emily clapped her hands, scattering petals into the air. "Kiss her, Daddy!" Laughter filled the garden again as Alexander leaned in, sealing the vow with a kiss. The fountain splashed, the roses swayed, and the moment felt like a page rewritten in their story. The dark beginning erased, replaced with light. Afterward, the three of them walked together along the stone path where it had all begun. Emily pointed to the spot where she had once fallen. "Remember here? When I cried and you thought Sophia hurt me?" Alexander winced softly. "I remember. And I was wrong." He knelt to look his daughter in the eye. "Do you forgive me for not listening?" Emily threw her arms around his neck. "You listen now. That's all that matters." Sophia placed a gentle hand on Alexander's shoulder, her smile tender. "She's right. The past doesn't own us anymore." Together, they walked the path again, not as a place of pain, but as a symbol of healing. Emily took 2 steps forward on her own, her balance steady, her laughter bright. She didn't need the crutches anymore, but even if she stumbled, she knew she would never fall alone again. As the sun dipped low, guests departed, leaving the garden quiet once more. The fountain sang softly, and the scent of roses hung in the air. Alexander, Sophia, and Emily remained, sitting together beneath the arbor. Emily leaned against Sophia's side, her eyes drooping with sleep. "Can we always stay like this?" she murmured. Alexander brushed a curl from her forehead. "Always." Sophia pressed a kiss to Emily's hair, whispering, "Forever, cariño." In that stillness, the truth became clear. Family was not about blood, nor wealth, nor appearances. It was about presence, trust, and love chosen every single day. Years later, the Hayes mansion would still hold its grandeur, but the greatest story it carried was not one of contracts or fortune. It was the story of a little girl who learned to walk, a woman who learned to belong, and a man who learned to love again. And in the quiet corners of the garden, where roses bloomed and the fountain whispered, their laughter lingered, a reminder that even the coldest hearts could be reborn when touched by trust. Thank you for staying with us until the very end of this healing journey. If this story touched your heart, we'd love for you to subscribe so you never miss the next one. Your support means the world.